My name is Evaden Whitmore, and at 70 years old, I've learned that dignity isn't something others hand to you. It's something you carry quietly, even when the people you love most try to strip it away. The dining room smelled faintly of roasted rosemary chicken candles flickering against the tall windows that looked out over Charleston's quiet streets. The table had been set with Vanessa's usual precision wine glasses, gleaming napkins folded into sharp triangles, silverware aligned as though a photograph might be taken for a magazine. She lived for presentation. As I stepped closer, my grandchildren Noah and Lily shifted in their seats and waved me over with bright smiles. "Grandma, sit by us." Lily's voice carried the sweet eagerness only an 8-year-old can summon. I felt my heart lift, but before I could take the chair between them, Vanessa's voice sliced through the air. "Don't sit next to me, Mom. Take the other end." The room went still. Knives hovered above plates, glasses paused halfway to lips. My son-in-law, David, cleared his throat, but said nothing. Even Noah's grin faltered as he looked between me and his mother. I felt heat rush to my face. For a breath, I stood there, the weight of every eye pressing against me. It wasn't the first time Vanessa had tried to remind me that this was her house now that I was a guest who needed direction. But tonight was different. Tonight, the family lawyer, Mr. Harris, sat among us, his leather folder resting by his elbow. I let the silence stretch a moment longer than was comfortable, then drew in a breath. My hands did not tremble as I pulled out the chair beside Mr. Harris. "This will do just fine," I said, smiling as though nothing at all had passed between us. Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she said no more. The sound of cutlery resumed, though the air felt charged as if an unseen current ran beneath our feet. I kept my eyes on the plate before me, but inside, my heart beat steadily with something that wasn't humiliation anymore. It was resolve. Conversation trickled back. David asking his cousin about work, Vanessa laughing loudly at her own joke, the children whispering over their mashed potatoes. I ate slowly, listening, keeping my posture straight. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the folder by Mr. Harris's hand, and I knew exactly why it was there. The meal would end as meals always do, but what followed would not be ordinary. I had waited weeks for this night, endured more than enough sharp words and heavy silences. Sitting in that chair, I felt the moment draw nearer, the moment when Vanessa would discover that not every performance ends with applause. I reached for my water glass, lifting it steadily to my lips. Across the table, Vanessa's gaze flicked toward Mr. Harris's folder again, then back to me. Her smile was stretched too wide, brittle at the edges. I held her eyes for a fraction of a second, then turned calmly to Noah and asked about his day at school. The tension stayed in the room, coiled and waiting, as if the walls themselves were listening. After dinner, once the candles burned low and the silverware had been cleared away, I lingered in the hallway outside the dining room. From there, I could see the carved archways, the wide plank floors polished to a soft sheen, the staircase curving upward toward the bedrooms. This house had been my anchor for nearly 4 decades. Every board and brick held echoes of the life Jonathan and I had built. We had bought it in the late 70s, back when Charleston was quieter, less polished than it is now. Jonathan had fallen in love with the tall windows and the ironwork balcony, while I had imagined rocking babies to sleep in the upstairs nursery. We stretched every dollar we had to make the down payment, believing the sacrifice was worth it. Through hurricanes, lean years, and celebrations, this home stood steady. It wasn't just where we lived. It was the proof of our endurance. Jonathan used to say, "A house is just walls, Evie. What matters is what we do inside them." He was right. The walls saw Sunday dinners with neighbors' birthday cakes lopsided with too much frosting, and long nights we held each other when bad news came. When cancer took him 10 years ago, I thought the house might collapse under the weight of my grief, but it didn't. It held me. It reminded me that he was still here somehow. In the beams he repaired the garden, he planted the study where his books still lined the shelves. Now I live here with Vanessa and her husband David. When Jonathan died, they offered for me to stay with them, and at first it felt like a blessing. I had my own room, I could be near the children, and I believed we were one family, pulling together. Over time, though, that sense of belonging shifted. My name was still on the deed, but in the daily rhythm of life, it often felt like I was a guest in a home I once ruled with warmth and confidence. David is polite, careful with his words, the sort of man who rarely raises his voice. He works long hours in finance, and when he's home, he tends to retreat into newspapers or the glow of his laptop. He isn't unkind, but he has mastered the art of letting silence fill the space where defense should live. Sometimes I wonder if he stays quiet out of fear of conflict with Vanessa, or if deep down he agrees with her. I cannot always tell. The children are different. Noah is 10, thoughtful and gentle with a head full of questions about the world. Lily, at 8, is bold and imaginative, always twirling through rooms as though the house itself were a stage. They are the ones who make me feel necessary. When they tumble into my room with crayon drawings or curl up beside me for bedtime stories, I can almost forget the cold looks and clipped remarks that come when their mother believes I've overstepped. Still, I remind myself, this is the house Jonathan and I fought to keep through recessions and storms. It is the roof under which I raised my daughter. It is where my grandchildren are growing. It carries our history, our laughter, our pain. Losing it would feel like losing Jonathan all over again. That night, after the dinner table had emptied and Vanessa's voice echoed sharp from the kitchen as she scolded David about the seating arrangement, I walked slowly through the halls, touching the banister Jonathan once sanded by hand. I paused by the study door where his coat still hung on a hook, faint with the smell of cedar. This house is more than wood and brick. It is a promise, and I intended to keep it. It wasn't one moment that broke me. It was 1,000 little ones. At first I tried to ignore them. A small correction here, a sigh there. Vanessa had her ways, I told myself, and I had mine. But over time, the small cuts began to add up, slicing into the quiet corners of my days, until I felt raw inside. One morning, I folded a basket of laundry in the den, humming softly to myself. Lily had been sick with a fever the night before, and I'd stayed up with her laying cool cloths on her forehead while Vanessa slept through the night. I thought I was doing something kind by washing the bedsheets afterward, but when Vanessa walked in, her eyes flicked to the stack of towels I had folded. "No, Mom," she said with a tight smile. "You've got them all wrong. They don't fit right in the closet when you fold them like that. Let me redo them." Before I could answer, she plucked the pile from my hands and shook them out, refolding each with sharp, precise motions. The towels landed in a crisp stack, perfect edges aligned as if my softer folds were an embarrassment. I stood there, holding a single pillowcase, my throat dry. I began, but she cut me off. "It's fine. I've got it." It wasn't the towels that stung. It was the way she stripped the small gesture of meaning, as though my hands, the same ones that had folded her baby blankets decades earlier, no longer knew how to be useful. The same pattern repeated in the kitchen. I would peel carrots for dinner, careful not to leave thick ridges, and she would step in behind me. "You always waste too much," she'd say, taking the knife from my hand. Or if I stirred a sauce, she'd glance at the spoon and mutter, "That's not how it's done." One evening, I reached for the salt when Noah asked for a little on his potatoes, but Vanessa's hand shot out first. "Mom, don't. He doesn't need more salt," she said loudly, as though I had offered the child poison. Noah's cheeks flushed red, caught between us. I set the shaker down quietly and tried to smile at him, though my chest ached. David was there through all of this, always there. He would look up from his phone or his papers when Vanessa's tone sharpened, but never spoke. His silence weighed heavier than her words. A glance, a tightening of his jaw, and then nothing. He would return to scrolling, leaving me suspended in humiliation. The moments blurred together. Vanessa rearranging the way I set the table because guests expect the knife on the right. Vanessa insisting I not hover in the kitchen because I'd just make a mess. Vanessa correcting the way I said Lily's teacher's name at pickup as though my tongue were clumsy. Each time I told myself to let it go, to stay quiet for the sake of peace. But peace never came. What settled instead was a growing awareness that I was being erased piece by piece from the rhythm of the household. The children tried to stitch me back in with their laughter. Noah would curl up beside me with a library book. Lily would braid my thinning hair with clumsy fingers, and in those moments, I felt whole again. Yet even their warmth couldn't erase the sting of being treated like an intruder by my own daughter. One afternoon, while standing in the hallway with a basket of linens, I overheard Vanessa in the kitchen telling David Mom means well, but she's always underfoot. She doesn't realize this is our house now. David didn't answer. I pressed the basket tighter against my chest, the fabric edges digging into my skin. His silence said enough. It wasn't a single blow that made me bleed. It was the silence that followed each cut, the silence that told me no one would step in, that I would have to find a way to step in for myself. Every afternoon, just before 3, I waited by the front window, where the lace curtain framed a view of the street. The school bus always slowed at the corner brakes hissing, and then the small thunder of feet against the pavement followed. Those were the moments I lived for, the sound of Noah and Lily running up the walkway, their backpacks bouncing their voices, carrying into the house like sunlight, breaking through cloud. Grandma, they called in unison, bursting through the door before I could even reach for the knob. Noah would tug at my sleeve, eager to show me the rock he found at recess that looked like a dragon's tooth, or the test with a red star at the top. Lily usually threw her arms around my waist first, pressing her cheek against me before thrusting forward a picture drawn in crayon stick figures, our family standing under a crooked rainbow. I never tired of those drawings. Each one had me in it, always near the center, a smiling figure with hair that Lily shaded a silvery gray. When I pinned them to the corkboard in my room, the walls looked less lonely. Our afternoons together became a secret rhythm, one I guarded fiercely. We spread homework across the dining table while I sliced apples into neat wedges. Noah's brow furrowed as he sounded out words, and Lily tapped her pencil against the page until she finally broke into a grin when she solved a math problem. I praised every effort, every line, because I knew how much it mattered to be seen. Sometimes, we curled on the sofa, their legs tucked under mine, and read from the same book. Lily loved fairy tales with castles and crowns. Noah preferred stories about explorers mapping the sea. I gave each character a different voice, drawing laughter that tumbled out of them like music. Even on hard days when Vanessa's sharp words still clung to me like thorns, the children's presence soothed the sting. Lily's hand in mine was small but steady, and Noah's quiet confidence when he leaned his head against my shoulder gave me strength. They didn't care how I folded towels or stirred sauce. To them, I was simply Grandma the safe harbor at the end of a long school day. One evening, as we sat together on the porch swing, Noah asked Grandma, "Do you ever get lonely when we're at school?" I looked at his serious eyes, so much like Jonathan's, and felt a lump rise in my throat. Sometimes, I admitted, but then, you come home and it all goes away. He nodded, as though he understood more than a 10-year-old should. Lily climbed into my lap, pressing her cheek against my chest. We'll never let you be lonely, she whispered. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of crayons and shampoo. For a moment, I believed her completely. But as dusk settled, and I led them inside, Vanessa's heels clicked across the kitchen tile. Her eyes flicked to the three of us tangled together in laughter, and I saw the tightness in her smile. She didn't say anything then, but I felt the chill seep in, as though our warmth somehow threatened her. I held the children closer, unwilling to let that moment slip. In a house that too often echoed with cold silences, Noah and Lily were my light. They were the reason I stayed, the reason I kept enduring the cuts and barbs. Without them, I might have already packed a bag and left. With them, I still believed I had a place. It began on a Thursday morning when I passed the kitchen and overheard Vanessa on the phone. Her tone was syrupy sweet, the one she used when arranging things that mattered to her image. She stood at the counter, pen in hand, jotting notes onto a sheet of paper already cluttered with names and times. Yes, Saturday evening. 7 o'clock sharp, she said, her voice lifting. Yes, we'll need extra chairs. It's important everyone feels included. She laughed softly, a sound that had no warmth in it, and added, and make sure the menu is formal. This isn't just any dinner. I paused in the doorway, holding the basket of laundry I had just pulled from the dryer. My breath caught when she said, "Oh, and don't forget to confirm with Mr. Harris. He'll be attending." Mr. Harris, our family lawyer. The basket grew heavy in my arms. For years, Harris had handled Jonathan's business matters, and later his estate. He was a fair man, respectful in a way that always made me feel seen. If Vanessa was inviting him to dinner, it wasn't for idle company. When she noticed me standing there, she hung up quickly. "Mom, you startled me." She straightened her notepad as though it were a shield. "We're having a family dinner this weekend. A little gathering. It'll be nice." "Nice," I repeated softly. My eyes flicked to the notepad before she turned it face down. She gave me a bright smile. "You'll want to wear something formal. This isn't one of our casual meals." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "It's important that everything looks perfect." I nodded, but inside unease rippled through me. Vanessa didn't care for perfect unless it served a purpose. Over the next 2 days, the house transformed. The dining table was extended with extra leaves. A rental company delivered gold-rimmed plates and tall candlesticks. Vanessa polished every surface until the house gleamed. She clipped fresh magnolia blossoms from the yard, arranging them in crystal vases as though a magazine spread were being prepared. I kept to the edges, dusting bookshelves and ironing linens, pretending not to notice the phone calls she made to cousins we hadn't seen in months. David fetched bottles of wine from the cellar, nodding dutifully at her instructions. "Don't forget the seating chart," Vanessa reminded him as she spread out place cards across the dining room table. "It has to be arranged properly. Appearances matter." Appearances. That word stuck in my throat like a stone. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I wandered into the dining room. The candles weren't lit yet, but the silverware caught the glow from the street lamps outside. At the head of the table, Vanessa had placed her own name card. To her right was David, then Mr. Harris. My name sat near the far end beside one of the cousins. I touched the card lightly, my fingertip brushing the ink. It was deliberate, pushing me out of the center, seating me where my presence would barely register. She was staging more than a dinner. This was theater. The next morning, Noah bounded into the kitchen while I was pouring cereal. "Grandma, what's happening Saturday?" "Mommy says we have to dress up." "Is it like a wedding?" "Not a wedding," I said, gently forcing a smile. "Just dinner." He frowned. "It sounds serious." I kissed the top of his head. "Sometimes dinners are serious." Inside, though, I felt the ground shift. Vanessa wanted control, and she was drawing the lines carefully, her at the head, me at the edge, and the lawyer within arm's reach. I folded my napkin that evening with deliberate calm, smoothing the creases flat against my lap. Whatever Vanessa intended she had underestimated me. This dinner wasn't hers alone. It was mine too. By Saturday evening, the house glowed with candlelight and polished silver. Vanessa moved through the rooms like a conductor leading an orchestra, her smile broad, her voice pitched just right for charm. Guests began arriving one by one, cousins from James Island, a family friend from Somerville, even Clara, who hadn't set foot in our home since Jonathan's funeral. Each was greeted by Vanessa with a kiss on the cheek and a compliment that floated as smoothly as the champagne she offered. "Clara, that dress is stunning. You must tell me where you found it. Mr. Harris, it means so much that you could join us tonight. David, take their coats, won't you?" Her laughter bubbled through the entryway, rich and practiced, and the guests responded as though they had stepped into the presence of royalty. I stood near the staircase for a moment watching it unfold. To the outside world, Vanessa looked like the perfect hostess, gracious, generous, flawless. Only I knew the edge beneath her polish, the sharpness that never appeared when eyes were upon her. Noah and Lily slipped their hands into mine as we moved toward the dining room. Their hair was neatly combed, Lily's dress pressed. Noah's shoes shined. They were proud to look grown up, though their whispers betrayed the excitement that still belonged to children. "Grandma, do we really have to sit still the whole time?" Lily asked. "Just for dinner," I whispered back. "After you can play." Vanessa's voice cut across the room before the children could say more. "Mother, keep them settled, please. This is a formal evening." She smiled sweetly toward the guests, as if she hadn't just issued a command. I pressed the children's hands gently, guiding them to their seats. The table was a masterpiece. White linen stretched tight crystal glasses, lined like soldiers' magnolia blossoms spilling fragrance from the centerpieces. Vanessa's name card gleamed at the head of the table, and she took her place there with a regal grace. David sat to her right, stiff in his tailored jacket. Beside him, Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses, his expression as unreadable as ever. Throughout the meal, Vanessa played her part flawlessly. She steered conversation with ease, drawing out laughter, weaving compliments into her questions. When a cousin mentioned the renovations on her beach house, Vanessa leaned forward with a sympathetic tilt of her head. How stressful that must have been. But of course it turned out beautifully. No one manages details like you. The cousin beamed, sipping her wine as if the words themselves were nectar. I watched, listening my fork, moving slowly over roasted chicken and asparagus. I had seen this performance for years, though never staged on such a scale. To strangers, Vanessa was a woman of elegance and grace. To me, she was an actress whose script demanded constant applause. When the conversation drifted toward memories of Jonathan, my husband Vanessa laid her hand lightly on David's arm and offered a story about how Jonathan had once advised him on business. Her voice softened, her gaze lowered, a portrait of humility. The relatives nodded, charmed, as though she were honoring Jonathan's memory. But I remembered how she had rolled her eyes at his old stories, how she had once whispered that he was out of touch with the modern world. Tonight, she wore reverence like another piece of jewelry. Each smile she gave, each laugh that rang too brightly, was a reminder of the distance between what others saw and what I lived with daily. The hypocrisy gnawed at me even as I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap. At one point, Clara leaned toward me. "Your daughter has really grown into her role here, hasn't she? Such a credit to your family." I smiled faintly, unwilling to break the illusion for her. "She's certainly very capable," I replied, though the words tasted bitter. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward me at that moment, a flash of triumph buried in her grin. She knew exactly how convincing her performance was, and she relished my silence. The meal continued, courses arriving one after the other, conversation flowing like wine. On the surface, it was a gathering of family and friends, a night of celebration. Beneath it, though, the air thrummed with something else, a tension no one but I seemed to notice. Every time Vanessa's gaze darted toward Mr. Harris's folder resting by his chair, my heart tightened. This was no ordinary dinner. It was theater, and I was not just a spectator. I was part of the script. The clinking of glasses and the scrape of chairs filled the dining room as guests began to find their seats. Vanessa hovered near the head of the table, her hand light on David's shoulder, as though guiding not only him, but the entire evening. Her eyes swept over the cards she had so carefully arranged, ensuring every person was exactly where she wanted them. I moved toward the space between Noah and Lily, who had already pulled out a chair for me. Their little faces glowed with anticipation, their voices bubbling with whispers. But before I could sit, Vanessa's voice cut through the air. "Mother not there. Please take the far end tonight." The room went still. Even the candles seemed to falter in their glow. Every guest's gaze flicked toward me, waiting. Noah's mouth opened in protest, but I placed a hand on his shoulder, quieting him. I could feel Lily's fingers curl into mine, her confusion heavy and innocent. I turned slowly toward Vanessa. Her smile was polished wide enough for the table to see, but her eyes held that glint of steel I knew too well. To the guests, it would sound like the most natural suggestion, the hostess making room for a smooth evening. To me, it was deliberate, pointed the command of a woman intent on reminding me of my place or erasing it altogether. David shifted uncomfortably beside her, his eyes fixed on the silverware. He cleared his throat as if about to speak, then thought better of it. The silence from him, more than Vanessa's words, pressed on my chest. I let the moment linger, the weight of humiliation pressing in, but I refused to bow beneath it. With a calm I did not entirely feel, I released Lily's hand, walked past the chair meant for me, and stopped beside Mr. Harris. "This will do just fine," I said, softly, pulling the chair out with steady hands and lowering myself into it. The air seemed to shift. Forks paused in midair. Vanessa's smile tightened her nails, pressing faint crescents into the back of David's chair. She hadn't expected defiance, not in front of cousins and friends and the lawyer she had summoned. Mr. Harris glanced at me, a brief, unreadable look, then offered the smallest of nods. That nod gave me strength. The children, wide-eyed, shuffled closer on their chairs, relief flickering across their faces. For them, it wasn't about politics or documents. It was about love, about their grandmother not being sent to the end of the table like a stranger. Vanessa smoothed the fabric of her dress and resumed her role. "Of course," she said brightly, her voice lifting for the room. "Wherever you're comfortable, Mother." But I caught the flicker in her jaw, the tension she could not quite hide. Conversation resumed in hesitant threads, but the atmosphere had changed. A cousin asked about Charleston's new art festival. Someone else laughed at a story David shared. Yet under it, all the guests stole glances toward me, toward Vanessa. Sensing the current that ran beneath the evening, I kept my face composed, my posture straight. My fork moved with deliberate calm as I tasted the roasted chicken. But inside my heart beat with the knowledge that the ground beneath us was shifting. Vanessa thought she had drawn the map of this dinner, placing me on the outskirts where I could not interfere. But by choosing that seat, I had stepped directly into the center of her stage. The candlelight caught in the curve of the lawyer's glasses, glinting as he set his folder on the table beside me. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward it again and again, betraying her anticipation. I folded my napkin neatly in my lap, the gesture small but steady. Whatever came next, I was ready. The first course arrived in porcelain bowls, steam curling upward from a creamy bisque that smelled faintly of sherry. The clatter of spoons against china filled the room, punctuated by bursts of polite laughter. To an outsider, it might have seemed like any other family gathering cousins, sharing stories. Wine poured generously, the glow of candlelight warming the air. But beneath the surface, something sharp lingered, like the hum of an unseen wire pulled taut. Vanessa presided from her seat at the head of the table, her posture regal, her voice light. She steered the conversation easily, drawing attention where she wanted it, letting it drift away when it suited her. Clara didn't. "You take that trip to Savannah last month. You must tell us about it," she said, smiling brightly. Clara obliged, recounting carriage rides and cobblestone streets, while the others nodded with interest. Yet I noticed how Vanessa's eyes slid almost unconsciously toward the leather folder resting beside Mr. Harris's plate. It lay there, silent and unassuming, but every glance she gave it tightened the knot in my stomach. I knew too well that the evening was not about food or family. It was about those papers waiting to be opened. I spooned a bite of soup, though I hardly tasted it. Instead, I studied the details around me, the way David dabbed his mouth with his napkin, but never quite looked up the way Noah swung his legs beneath the table, restless, while Lily whispered to him about the magnolias in the vase. The children's chatter was soft, sweet, and almost enough to ease the tension. Almost. Vanessa laughed at Clara's story, her voice too bright, her eyes darting once more. "Mr. Harris, you've been to Savannah often, haven't you?" she asked smoothly. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, answering with measured politeness. "Several times, yes. Beautiful architecture." Vanessa nodded, satisfied, but her gaze lingered on him a second longer than courtesy required. She wanted everyone comfortable, lulled by the performance, until she struck. I set my spoon down, folded my hands in my lap, and breathed steadily. Patience had become my shield in this house, the one weapon Vanessa never expected me to wield. The main course followed: roasted chicken, rosemary potatoes, asparagus glistening with butter. The guests leaned in to compliment the seasoning, praising Vanessa's taste, while she deflected with mock modesty. Oh, it was nothing. Just a little effort. Her laugh filled the room again, but I caught the way her hand twitched against the stem of her glass, as if eager for what was still to come. Small talk swirled, stories of children at college, memories of summers long gone, plans for the holidays. Yet through it all, the folder sat at the edge of vision, an anchor, pulling the evening slowly toward its inevitable weight. At one point, Lily reached for my hand beneath the table, her small fingers curling into mine. I smiled at her, but my eyes stayed on Vanessa. She had built this performance carefully, every guest charmed, every detail polished. But her eagerness betrayed her. She wasn't patient, not like I was. The candles flickered shadows stretching across the walls as if they too were waiting. I sipped water, my throat tight, and wondered how long the charade would last before Vanessa could no longer contain herself. The storm was coming. I could feel it in the air as surely as the heaviness before a southern thunderstorm when the sky goes quiet and the earth holds its breath. The plates had been cleared, leaving behind only the faint scent of rosemary and wine. For a moment, the conversation lulled, a gentle hush settling over the table. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Her smile stretched wide, polished as ever, but I could feel the shift in her posture. Now that everyone's comfortable, she began, her voice smooth. "We can finally get to the important part." The chatter died away. Every head turned toward her. I watched the gleam in her eye, the practiced pause before she continued. She tapped her manicured fingers against the tablecloth, a soft, deliberate rhythm. "Mr. Harris," she said, tilting her head with feigned sweetness. "Do you have the documents?" My chest tightened. The words floated into the silence like the tolling of a bell. Around the table, forks were set down, glasses placed carefully back onto the linen. The children sat straighter, sensing the gravity even if they didn't understand it. Mr. Harris shifted, adjusting the leather folder that had sat quietly beside his plate all evening. He didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, he glanced once at Vanessa, then at me. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried weight. "Yes," he said evenly. "I have them." The guests leaned forward ever so slightly, curiosity sparking. A cousin cleared her throat, whispering to the person beside her, but no one asked aloud what documents these were. They didn't have to. The air itself carried the answer business inheritance ownership, the kinds of things that drew lines between family members and left scars that never faded. I folded my hands in my lap, pressing my fingers together until my knuckles whitened. My face remained still, but inside my heart beat a steady, determined rhythm. Vanessa's smile widened, triumph flashing in her eyes. She thought she had orchestrated this perfectly. She thought tonight would be the night she put me in my place for good, her name glowing at the head of the table while mine was reduced to ink on the margin of a page. "Wonderful," she said brightly, turning toward the guests. "You all know how important it is to have clarity in matters like these. With my father gone, we've all had to think about what comes next for the family estate. It's best to put everything under one name, don't you agree?" Her words fell with the weight of certainty, as though the decision had already been made. David shifted beside her, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on his glass. He didn't speak. He never did. His silence was a language I knew too well, the language of complicity or cowardice, or both. I kept my eyes steady, not on Vanessa, but on Mr. Harris. He reached for the folder, unbuckled the clasp, and set it on the table with a soft thud that seemed to echo louder than the laughter had minutes earlier. The room leaned toward him. Vanessa sat poised, her chin lifted, her composure perfect. But I saw the hunger behind it, the need to win, to have her power recognized. I breathed in slowly, filling my lungs with the warm, heavy air of the dining room. I had been preparing for this moment, rehearsing it in the silence of my own room, in the quiet conversations with Jonathan's memory, in the cautious meetings with the lawyer himself. The folder lay open now, its papers neatly stacked, the truth waiting to be revealed. My pulse slowed, strangely calm, as though my body knew something. My mind dared not voice aloud. This was not Vanessa's victory. It was mine. The papers lay open on the table, the candlelight catching their edges. But my mind drifted back to the moment I first understood what Vanessa intended. It had been a month earlier, on a damp September afternoon. The rain had fallen steadily all morning, pattering against the shutters, leaving the air heavy with the smell of wet earth. I had just pulled a load of laundry from the dryer and was folding it in the upstairs hallway, humming absently to myself. Noah and Lily were at school. David was still at the office, and Vanessa had taken her phone call in the kitchen below. I wasn't trying to listen, but her voice carried sharp and clear through the thin walls and wooden stairwell. "Yes," she was saying. Her tone clipped. "Once everything is under our name, she won't be able to stop us. The house, the savings, it'll all be secure. It just makes sense." My hands froze on a towel, the fabric soft and warm against my fingers that suddenly felt cold. "She'll adjust," Vanessa continued, lowering her voice slightly, though it still carried upward. "Michael," she caught herself quickly correcting. "David understands. He knows this is practical. At her age, it's irresponsible to leave things scattered. Besides, she doesn't use half of it. It's wasted." The towel slipped from my hands, landing silently on the floor. I pressed a fist to my mouth as if that could steady my breathing. There was a pause in her speech. Then laughter light, rehearsed. "Don't worry. Once it's done, she won't have a say." We'll present it cleanly, and the lawyer will finalize. She won't even realize until it's too late. I gripped the banister, my knees threatening to give way. The voice on the other end of the line was muffled, indistinct, but Vanessa's responses were enough to draw the picture. She wasn't speaking of helping me manage affairs. She was speaking of control, of removing me from the very life Jonathan and I had built. I staggered back into my room, closing the door softly behind me. On the dresser sat Jonathan's photograph framed in mahogany, his smile caught in a candid moment from years ago. My eyes blurred as I sank onto the edge of the bed. "You worked your whole life for this family," I whispered into the stillness. "I won't let her erase you. I won't let her erase me." The tears came then, quiet but unstoppable. I buried my face in the sheet I had just folded, the scent of fabric softener clinging faintly to the cloth. For the first time, I understood the depth of Vanessa's disdain. All the sighs, the corrections, the clipped words, they weren't just impatience. They were rehearsal for a larger act. In the days that followed, I carried her words like a stone in my pocket, heavy and unyielding. Each time she smiled too brightly, each time David avoided my gaze, I remembered that phone call. Once everything is under our name, the cruelty of it sharpened each time I replayed it in my head. At night, when the house was quiet and the children slept, I sat by Jonathan's photo and spoke to him in a voice barely above a whisper. "They think I am powerless. They think I am too old to fight. But you knew me better than that." The grief that had once paralyzed me shifted slowly into something else, resolve. I began noticing the details, what papers were left on the desk, what mail arrived, what names Vanessa dropped into conversations. She thought she was careful, but arrogance breeds mistakes. I was not going to crumble. I was going to watch, listen, and remember. So when I sat at that dinner table weeks later staring at the folder by Mr. Harris's side, I did not tremble. I had already heard the truth in my daughter's own voice. I had carried it in silence, waiting for this very night. That night, after hearing Vanessa's words on the phone, I moved through the house as if in a daze. I finished the laundry in silence, folded each towel with care, though my hands shook. My chest ached with something deeper than anger. It was betrayal, threaded with grief. When the house finally settled into quiet, when even the children's laughter had faded into sleep, I returned to my room. The lamp on the nightstand cast a soft circle of light, revealing the photograph that had been my companion for a decade. Jonathan's face, caught mid-smile, looked out from behind the glass as if he were about to speak. His eyes held the same warmth they always had, that steady reassurance I used to lean on when the world felt heavy. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at that picture. "She wants it all," I whispered, my voice breaking. "The house, the savings, everything you worked for. She wants to erase me from it, as if I was never here." My fingers trembled as I touched the edge of the frame. "I thought raising her meant she would carry you with her, that she would honor what you built. But she doesn't see you in these walls. She doesn't see me. She sees only what she can claim." Tears welled, spilling before I could stop them. They dripped onto my lap, darkening the fabric of my skirt. For a moment, I gave in to the despair. I let myself grieve not just for Jonathan, but for the daughter I thought I knew, the one who had once clutched my hand when she was afraid of thunderstorms, who had leaned on me when she lost her first job, who had whispered thank you through tears the day Noah was born. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman with eyes cold as glass. The silence of the room pressed on me, heavy and suffocating. I bent forward, my hands covering my face, and whispered into the stillness, "What am I without you? How do I fight this alone?" But the photograph remained, his eyes steady, his smile unchanged. The same man who had once told me that strength wasn't about noise, but about endurance. I could almost hear his voice low and sure. Evie, don't let them take what we built. Don't let them forget who you are. I drew a shaky breath, lowering my hands. The tears were still there, but beneath them, something steadier began to stir. I thought of the nights Jonathan had worked late, sweating over books and ledgers, to pay the mortgage, the mornings he rose before dawn, to tend the garden so the children would have fresh tomatoes at lunch. Every nail hammered into the beams, every hour saved for the children's schooling. It was all a testament to the life we had forged together. I pressed my forehead against the frame, closing my eyes. I promise you, I whispered, I won't let her erase us. I won't let her twist what you left behind. This house, this family, it won't be hers to shape. It will carry your name, your love, your truth. And I will protect it even if I have to stand alone. The weight in my chest eased just slightly. The tears slowed. My hand steadied against the photograph, not from certainty, but from resolve. I knew the path ahead would not be gentle. Vanessa would not give up easily, and David's silence was as sharp as any blade. But Jonathan's memory was my anchor. And in that anchor, I found the beginnings of courage. I switched off the lamp, leaving the room in darkness, except for the faint moonlight spilling across the dresser. The photograph glimmered in silver tones, his face softened by shadow, but his presence felt closer than it had in years. I lay down with the echo of my own vow in my ears, and for the first time since hearing Vanessa's plan, I felt sleep come, not peaceful, but steady, the kind of rest one takes before a battle. The morning after my whispered promise to Jonathan, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The grief was still there, heavy as always, but beneath it pulsed a firmer current determination. I dressed simply, pressed a hand against the photo once more, and left the house without telling Vanessa where I was going. Mr. Harris's office sat on Broad Street in a 2-story brick building that had survived hurricanes and time with quiet dignity. I had been there many years earlier, sitting beside Jonathan when he updated his business contracts, and later when he drafted his will. The brass nameplate still gleamed on the door, Edward J. Harris, attorney at law. Inside, the waiting room smelled faintly of paper and polish. Books lined the walls in dark oak shelves, their spines worn from decades of use. A secretary offered me tea while I waited, but my hands trembled too much to hold the cup steady. When Mr. Harris finally stepped out, he looked exactly as I remembered, tall, gray-haired, with eyes that missed nothing but judged little. He extended a hand warmly. Mrs. Whitmore, it's been a long time. Yes, I murmured, following him into his office. Too long. We sat across from each other at his heavy mahogany desk. My heart hammered as I began. Mr. Harris, I need to know what Jonathan left behind, what protections there are. My daughter Vanessa, she's planning something. I overheard her. I expected doubt, maybe even surprise. But his expression only softened with concern. He folded his hands over a stack of files and said, Jonathan anticipated this. The breath caught in my throat. What do you mean? He opened a drawer and retrieved a thick folder, sliding it carefully toward me. When Jonathan drafted his estate plan, he was very clear about 2 things: that you were to remain secure in your home, and that your grandchildren's future would not be left in anyone else's hands. My fingers hovered over the folder, afraid to disturb the papers. So the house is yours, he said firmly. Your name is on the deed. Jonathan said it that way intentionally. His passing does not alter that. As for the savings, a portion was set aside in a trust for Noah and Lily. You, Mrs. Whitmore, are the trustee. No one, not Vanessa, not David, can touch it. Relief surged so suddenly that I felt dizzy. Tears stung my eyes as I pressed a hand to my mouth. He thought of everything. Mr. Harris nodded. He knew you, and he knew the pressures you might face. He wanted his legacy protected. And he trusted you to guard it. I sat in silence for a moment, letting his words settle into me. All those long nights Jonathan had worked, all the sacrifices he made, they hadn't ended with his death. He had left me not just with memories, but with the authority to preserve what mattered. I lifted my head, my voice steadier now. Then I want to make sure it cannot be undone. Vanessa is determined. She'll try to twist things to corner me. Mr. Harris leaned back, studying me with thoughtful eyes. Then we'll reaffirm everything. I can update the records, file a confirmation of the trust, and prepare certified copies of the deed. If Vanessa attempts anything, we'll be ready. The trembling in my hands eased. For the first time since Jonathan's passing, I felt not just like his widow, but like his partner. Again, still carrying the weight of what we had built, still defending it. I reached across the desk and touched the folder, the paper cool beneath my fingertips. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for reminding me that I'm not powerless." Mr. Harris gave a small, approving nod. "You're not. You're the one holding the line." When I left his office, the Charleston air felt different, crisp with a breeze that carried the salt of the harbor. I walked slower than usual, letting the sun warm my shoulders. The stone in my chest had lightened. I wasn't just enduring anymore. I was preparing. The leather folder rested on the table, its clasp undone. Conversation had faded into expectant silence. I felt every gaze flick between Mr. Harris, Vanessa, and myself. The air was thick, heavy, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses, his tone calm but deliberate. "Before we proceed, I want to make something clear. These are not new decisions, but confirmations of your late husband, Jonathan Whitmore's wishes." At the mention of Jonathan's name, a ripple passed across the table. Relatives bowing their heads, the children sitting straighter. My throat tightened, but I held my composure. Vanessa leaned forward, her smile carefully fixed. "Of course," she said brightly. "We all want clarity. It's easier if everything is under one name." She glanced toward the guests as if expecting nods of agreement. Mr. Harris opened the first document and placed it flat against the linen. "This," he said, "is the deed to the Whitmore home. It was purchased jointly by Jonathan and Evaden. Upon Jonathan's passing, ownership passed fully to Evaden. Legally and unequivocally, this house belongs to her." The words landed like a stone thrown into still water. A stunned hush spread across the table. I heard a cousin murmur another shift uneasily in their chair. Vanessa's smile faltered, the muscles in her face tightening. "That can't be right," she said quickly. "We discussed with you, David, and I were told it would simplify matters if Mr. Harris raised a hand, cutting her off." His voice was steady, firm. "I never told you that. The law is clear, and Jonathan's instructions were clear. This home is Evaden's, and that is not subject to contest." For the first time that evening, I allowed myself to meet Vanessa's eyes directly. Her face, once composed and radiant for her guests, betrayed the crack beneath the mask. Red bloomed along her cheekbones, her jaw set tight. The children looked at me, puzzled but eager. Noah whispered, "Grandma, does that mean—" I reached for his hand under the table, giving it a small squeeze. "It means this house is safe," I whispered back. The murmurs continued. Clara shifted in her seat, clearing her throat as though to smooth over the tension. David stared at his plate, refusing to look at anyone, his silence screaming louder than words. Vanessa's composure slipped further. "This isn't how it was supposed to be," she hissed, though her voice was low enough only those nearest could hear. I kept my tone even soft enough to calm, but strong enough to stand. "You asked me to sit at the end of the table, Vanessa, but I chose my place here, and my place in this home is not up for negotiation." The room seemed to tilt, the balance shifting. For years I had been silent, enduring, waiting. Tonight, Jonathan's words, his foresight, had spoken through the very papers she thought would erase me. Mr. Harris closed the folder briefly, giving the table a moment to settle. The first stone had fallen. The cracks had begun. The silence that followed Mr. Harris's declaration clung to the table like smoke after a fire. Forks lay untouched, glasses half raised and forgotten. Vanessa sat rigid at the head, her smile gone, her composure trembling at the edges. Mr. Harris cleared his throat and opened another folder, the shuffle of papers loud in the tense room. "There is more," he said, his tone unwavering. Jonathan Whitmore also established a trust in the name of his grandchildren, Noah and Lily. That trust is reserved for their education, their welfare, and their future. The children blinked, unsure of the meaning, but sat up taller as their names filled the air. Noah leaned closer to me, curiosity widening his eyes. Lily grinned, a small dimple appearing in her cheek, sensing only that something important and good had been said. Vanessa leaned forward, voice tight. "And who oversees this trust?" Mr. Harris looked directly at me. "Evaden Whitmore is the sole trustee. She has full authority to safeguard and distribute those funds as she deems fit for Noah and Lily's benefit. No one else has legal control." The words landed like sunlight breaking through a storm. My shoulders eased. My chest lifted, though I forced myself to remain steady. Noah tugged gently at my sleeve. "Grandma," he whispered, "does that mean you'll help us with college?" Tears pricked my eyes, but I smiled and squeezed his hand. "It means your future is safe, sweetheart." The cousins exchanged glances, whispers rustling around the table. Some smiled softly in approval. Others looked away uneasy with the growing confrontation. Vanessa, however, could no longer keep her mask in place. She slammed her palm against the table, the glasses rattling from the force. "This is outrageous. Those funds should be under my control. I'm their mother." Mr. Harris's voice hardened, though he did not raise it. "Your father trusted Evaden to carry his wishes. He believed her experience, her steadiness, would protect the children better than anyone else. The trust is clear and binding." David shifted beside her, his face pale, his eyes darting toward me but not settling. His silence hung heavier than ever. Vanessa's fury sharpened into a thin smile, her lips trembling as she spoke. "So my own mother holds the key to my children's future. That's what this says." I steadied my hands in my lap, forcing calm into my voice. "It says Jonathan wanted them protected, and I will honor that." Lily's hand slipped into mine beneath the table, small and warm, her smile as bright as the candles flickering above us. In that moment, I felt the weight of every sacrifice Jonathan and I had made, every long night, every dollar saved. All of it had led here not for me, but for them. Vanessa's gaze burned into me, but I didn't flinch. For once, it wasn't her power that filled the room. It was Jonathan's love reaching across time, binding me to my promise. The future had been placed in my hands, and I would not let it go. For a long heartbeat, after Mr. Harris's words, no one moved. The candles hissed, shadows flickered across the polished walls, and the weight of silence pressed on every chest at the table. Then Vanessa broke. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor as she stood hands flat against the tablecloth. "This is insane," she snapped, her voice rising sharp enough to make Lily flinch. "My own mother sitting here as if she's the queen of this house deciding my children's future? No, this is manipulation, pure and simple. She's using you all." She jabbed a finger toward Mr. Harris. "And you're letting her." Gasps rippled around the table. Clara, wide-eyed, pressed a hand to her pearls. One of the cousins muttered something under their breath, but no one dared interrupt. I sat still, my napkin folded neatly in my lap, refusing to rise to her fury. Across the table, Noah stared at me with round, anxious eyes. I gave him the smallest smile enough to tell him I wasn't afraid. Vanessa, Mr. Harris said evenly, "Your father's instructions were written years ago. Nothing tonight is new. It was always his wish that Evadne protect both the house and the trust." But Vanessa was past listening. Her hands trembled as she pointed toward me again. "She doesn't know what she's doing. She's old, she's fragile, she can barely manage herself. And you expect me to accept that she controls everything over my own family, over my children." Her voice cracked on the last word, trembling with rage. David finally stirred. He had sat stiff and silent all evening, eyes lowered, jaw clenched, his silence a wound deeper than any of Vanessa's words. But now he pushed back his chair and rose slowly, his face pale. "Enough," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. Vanessa turned on him, stunned. "What?" He met her glare with tired eyes. "I've let you talk. I've let you lead this performance, but I won't let you tear my mother apart in front of our children or humiliate her like this." A murmur spread through the guests. Clara lowered her hand from her pearl's relief, softening her expression. Vanessa's mouth fell open. "David, you can't mean I do." He cut in, his voice firmer now. "Dad wanted it this way. He trusted Mom, and I should have trusted her too. I should have defended her sooner." He looked at me, then guilt flickering in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom." For a moment I couldn't speak. The apology sat heavy in the air, fragile as glass. My chest ached, not just from the weight of what he said, but from the years of silence that had preceded it. Vanessa's face flushed red, her composure unraveling thread by thread. "You're siding with her. Against me. Against your wife." David's shoulders sagged, but he did not falter. "I'm siding with the truth." The words struck harder than anything else that night. The performance Vanessa had so carefully constructed, the perfect hostess, the smiling daughter, the gracious wife, crumbled in that instant. The guests no longer looked charmed. They looked at her with wary eyes, the curtain drawn back to reveal what lay beneath. Vanessa glanced wildly around the table, seeking an ally, but found none. Even the cousins shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to meet her gaze. The children huddled closer to me, Noah's hand slipping into mine under the table. "This isn't over," Vanessa hissed, her voice raw, but the authority had drained out of her. It sounded less like a threat and more like desperation. Mr. Harris calmly stacked the papers back into his folder, his movements precise. "It is over," he said firmly. "Jonathan's wishes are binding. Tonight only confirms them." The last of Vanessa's facade shattered. She dropped back into her chair, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes burning but defeated. I drew in a slow breath, letting the silence settle around us again. For years I had endured her small cuts, her disdain, her attempts to erase me. Tonight, the mask had fallen, and everyone had seen. The power in the room had shifted, and it was no longer hers to hold. The room felt hollow after Vanessa's outburst, the clinking of cutlery replaced by a silence that rang in my ears. She sat slumped in her chair, her lips pressed tight, her fury simmering just beneath the surface. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some staring at their plates, others daring quick glances at me. I laid my napkin neatly across the table and finally let my voice rise, not in volume, but in presence. "I want to be very clear," I said, my tone steady. "I am not here tonight to wrestle for control. I do not need power for myself. What I need is to protect what Jonathan built and to safeguard Noah and Lily's future." Noah looked up at me, eyes wide. Lily leaning closer against my side, as though my words wrapped around her too. My heart softened at the sight, but my voice remained firm. For decades, this house was not just wood and plaster. It was laughter, sacrifice, and love. Jonathan and I poured our lives into it, not for ownership's sake, but so our family would always have a place to stand. When he left this earth, his wish was not that his legacy be divided or erased, it was that it be honored. And that is what I will do. The cousins across the table nodded faintly, their eyes darting between me and Vanessa. Clara leaned forward, her expression soft with something like relief. Vanessa shot up from her chair, unable to bear the calm weight of my words. You make yourself sound so noble, but you're stealing what's mine. You've always wanted to control me, and now you'll use Father's name to do it. Do you think anyone believes this performance? Her voice cracked on the last word. I looked at her, not with anger, but with the quiet pity one feels for someone who has already lost. No, Vanessa, this is not a performance. This is me standing where I have always belonged. You may not like it, but truth doesn't need your permission. Her face flushed crimson, her hands clenched at her sides. For a moment I thought she might hurl more words, but none came. Her breath hitched, her composure shattered once more, and she grabbed her clutch from the table with a sharp motion. Enjoy your little victory, she spat, her voice brittle. This isn't the end. Without another glance, she stormed from the room, her heels striking the hardwood with staccato fury, until the sound faded down the hall. The guests sat frozen, caught between embarrassment and relief. David lowered his head into his hands, the weight of years of silence finally breaking him. I should have stopped this before it came to this, he said quietly. Then he looked up at me, his voice trembling. Mom, I'm sorry. Truly. I nodded, once accepting the words without prolonging them. Tonight was not about apologies. It was about clarity. Mr. Harris gathered his papers into the folder, his movements calm, deliberate. Jonathan's wishes have been reaffirmed, he said. There is no ambiguity. Yvonne is protected. The children are protected. That is what matters. The tension loosened at the edges of the table. Clara reached over to touch my arm lightly. You've carried this family with such grace, she murmured. Tonight only proved it. I felt my shoulders ease, though I remained upright, my dignity intact. The children pressed close to me, their warmth seeping into the cold space Vanessa had left behind. In that moment, I realized I had not only defended Jonathan's legacy, I had claimed my place in it. Not by shouting, not by striking back, but by standing steady when the storm demanded I fall. Strength, I thought, was never measured by the loudest voice in the room. It was measured in the silence that held its ground. The house was quiet again. Not the strained silence that used to hang between sharp words and colder stares, but a gentler quiet, the kind that followed after laughter, after footsteps, after the clinking of plates. Weeks had passed since that night. Vanessa had not returned. Her absence still carried a sting, but not the crushing weight it once might have. The cousins visited occasionally, their voices warmer, their glances at me softer, more respectful. David called once or twice, his tone subdued, though he never stayed long on the line. The children, though, came as they always had, their presence filling the spaces Vanessa left behind. Tonight, it was just us, Noah, Lily, and me, seated around the same long table that had once been the stage for humiliation and revelation. But now, there were no silver candelabras, no polished magnolias in glass vases, just a simple roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and Lily's favorite green beans sautéed with garlic. Grandma, can I say grace tonight? Lily asked, her small hands already folded. Of course, I said softly. She closed her eyes and whispered a child's prayer, simple and pure. Noah peeked halfway through, grinning at me before snapping his eyes shut again, trying to look solemn. I felt my lips curve into a smile. As we ate, Noah chattered about school projects, his voice animated. Lily leaned against me, her laughter spilling when I teased her about the ribbon she refused to take out of her hair. their energy wrapped around me like a blanket, softening the years of cuts and silences that had once made this house feel like a stranger's place. When the plates were cleared, we lingered. Noah doodled on his napkin, Lily played with the salt shaker, and I sat back listening. I thought of Jonathan then, how he had always said the table was the heart of the home. Not the furniture itself, but the way people gathered around it, the way voices rose and fell, the way stories lived in the scratches and stains left behind. I looked at the children, their faces lit by the lamp's glow, and felt the truth settle deep in me. The house was safe. Their futures were safe. But more than that, the table was mine again, claimed not through documents, but through respect. I reached out, brushing Lily's hair back, resting my other hand lightly on Noah's shoulder. "Do you know what matters most at this table?" I asked them. They looked up curious. "Not the food, though I hope you always enjoy it. Not even the house we sit in. What matters is respect. Respect is the rent you pay for your seat at this table. Not money, not power, just respect." Noah tilted his head, considering. Lily nodded solemnly as though she had been entrusted with a great secret. I smiled, letting the words rest between us, not as a lesson to be learned once, but as a truth I hoped would follow them long after I was gone. Outside, the night was calm, a Charleston breeze carrying the faint scent of the sea through the open window. The children leaned close, their warmth anchoring me to the present. Jonathan's photograph still sat on the mantel in the other room, but I didn't need to look at it to feel his presence. He was here in the laughter of his grandchildren, in the steadiness of my voice, in the table that still held our family, battered but unbroken. And as I sat there, surrounded by the only legacy that mattered, I whispered the thought that had carried me through the storm. If respect, not money, were the only inheritance you left, would your family treasure it or squander it like dust?